Hey, welcome to Gridiron Gurus. I'm Travis Lazarzik for the Kennebec Journal Morning Sentinel. I am joined this week, as always, by Drew Bonifant. Drew, how you doing?
Doing all right. How are you?
Good. We have a couple guests on this fine summer October day we had here in Central Maine today. We have from Gardiner High School head coach Joe White. Joe, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And from Coney High School head coach B.L. Lippert. B.L., thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'll turn it over to Drew for a little bit, and we can talk about this little game you guys have coming up this week.
141st edition of Cony-Gardiner, and let me just start off in general, guys. Talk about the excitement from when this game rolls around. You've had some big games this season, but I got to think there's always a little bit of something to this game that's not there for the other ones.
Yeah, definitely, and it's a little odd this year because it's not the last game of the regular season. We were talking today if we like that better or worse because, it's kind of like your Super Bowl to a large extent, and then the playoffs start the next week like last year, and you guys beat us, and then we lost in the playoffs, and it really happened quickly, we felt. So this year you get Cony-Gardiner, and then we get Brunswick, which is not a layup. You get Levitt, so that's not easy either, but even still, it's a little different when it's Cony-Gardiner, and it not being the last week. We'll kind of see how that feels, I guess, once we get done, but you can sense at practice, kids are excited, and in the school, some teachers really never talk football with us. They just kind of go about their business. But Cony-Gardiner week, a few will stop you and say, "Hey, it's Gardner this week, right? Good luck." So definitely a different feel around town and in the community, and it makes for a pretty special week.
And Joe, I've stopped by practice a couple times this week, and you can tell the players are getting pretty excited for it. I mean, just talk about the game. Same question to BL, but what it means to you and what you get the sense it means to your players as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes there's a bit of a lull in the season if where we dropped a couple games back to back, give you something to sort of reignite and motivate you. And last year, I noticed going into Cony-Gardiner week, the focus was real good and the intensity was a little bit higher, and you do start to see that in weeks like this. So yeah, it's an important game for the kids historically, and now they really get up for it. And regardless of what kind of situation you're in, towards the end of the season, the Cony-Gardiner game is still a big deal. So.
Mm-hmm. Does that add something to the nature of the game? The fact that both these teams are off to good competitive starts this season. And I mean, we've talked at length this year about what your team at Coney's been able to do. Gardner's battering heads with some of the top teams in Class C South, trying to get a good playoff spot there. Does it just add a little more to it when it's two good teams going at it?
Yeah, I think so. I think if both teams are 1-6 or 2-5 or something, that maybe it's a little bit less anticipation. I think probably have a pretty good crowd there Friday night since both teams, like you said, are off to a pretty good start with an eye toward the playoffs. So I think when they're both playing well, or, even if they're middle of the pack, at least competitive, I think that certainly adds to it. And I think we'll see that reflected Friday night too.
Yeah, and I think in some respects the division comes into play a little bit with now this being sort of a crossover game, and Coney doing as well as they've been doing, being worth a certain number of points. We don't count that out because for us in our situation it could be the difference between hosting a home field or having to drive a lengthy way down to the coast.
Sure.
So yeah, it's an extra piece to get ready for.
Yeah. Is this game hard to avoid the rest of the season? By that I mean, like you said, teachers are coming up to you, BL, in the school and talking about it this week. But is it something that's kind of always in the background during the rest of the season? I know the rivalry I grew up with in Vermont, Mount St. Joseph and Rutland, even though you're not playing each other every week, it's there. It's kind of always looming. And then finally, it's just magnified once you play it. Is this game kind of always looming in the background for you guys all season? Or?
Yeah, definitely. There's people every week. Mr. Kenny, Malon Kenny, longtime coach, and now he's a study hall monitor. He talks to me every week about what Gardner did. He talks about what we did. He goes, "Hey, Gardner, you see how they did forever?" I go, "Yeah, they did look good against Morris." And so, everyone kind of has an eye on our season, and then obviously Gardner down the river, and they know that we're playing them at some point, week 7 or week 8. So I think it's always there in the back of our minds, and I think just in conversations, it seems like people kind of track both teams, and especially like you said, when it's a crossover regular season game that counts. When it was in the preseason, it had a totally different feel, and now that it counts again, it has for a few years anyway. I definitely think it's something that's always in the back of everyone's mind.
Yeah, and everyone from both communities looks forward to it.
Sure.
And you get texts and calls occasionally, and you run into people you haven't seen in a long time, and they know it's Cony-Gardiner week. And I remember specifically my senior year, I wrote Coney on the inside of my face mask as a senior. So that I was always looking right at it. I mean, we played every game hard, but you look forward to Cony-Gardiner week for sure.
Sure.
Does the timing of this game help too? Because you both have, like you mentioned, to start off, big games at the end with Brunswick and then with Levitt for you. And if this were a game where you're playing a Mount Blue or a Morse or something like a team that could beat you if you took your eye off took your eye off the ball, and we're looking ahead to that game, I don't think you need to worry about players overlooking this week. So does it kind of help keep a team, keep a team focused these next 2 weeks of the season?
Yeah, I think so. And Brunswick's another one of our rivals, kind of developed here in the last 5 to 10 years. Brunswick, we've knocked them out of the playoffs. They knocked us out of the playoffs last year. We were the favorite at home. So when the schedule comes out, your eyes kind of find Gardner and Brunswick, and happen to be the last 2 weeks of the year. So for us, we saw that. And I'm sure the same feeling for Levitt. You guys knocked them out of the playoffs last year. I'm sure Mike remembers that. So I think it's an interesting finish to the season where you're ending on a high note, and then the playoffs, which is really the ultimate thing. You try not to lose track of that. Last year we lost, and I'm like, hey, the season's not over. It kind of feels like it because we lost to Gardner, but it's not over. We got playoffs to go, and it can affect how you perform. I'm not sure it did last year, but you could make the case it did since we lost as a favorite. But yeah, I think having these 2 games at the end for us is a really intriguing way to end the year, and we'll see how we respond.
Yeah, I think the intensity has increased a little bit. Because, certainly after Coney, we haven't necessarily looked ahead to Levitt, but we're facing similar teams, powerful offenses, and similar style, and so we kind of use this week as a stepping stone to prep for next week, and Levitt's attack as well, because both are pretty profound passing attacks, and it's going to require a couple weeks preparation.
Sure.
So it's kind of nice, and there's not going to be a letdown because just because the last game is Levitt. I think some of them I've heard to Levitt referred to as the Green Coney in some circles, but so it's going to keep the kids engaged.
And this is the first time in a while that we're not talking about a team trying to get off the schneid. Gardner got the big win last year. Coney got the dramatic win with the late Roddy touchdown the year before. So is that just another wrinkle to this too, where both players kind of have their memories of winning this game, and are it's not like one team is, I wonder what it would be like to win this game. Both of them have that feeling.
Yeah, I'd rather Gardner was still feeling that way, if I'm being honest. But yeah, I think so. I think our kids, we never took anything for granted, but yeah, we hadn't lost in a few years. So I think the kids were on that field, felt that loss, and they hadn't felt that before, and so maybe that's motivation. I'm not sure. I think just the whole season in general, kids are motivated for. But I think the fact that we lost was an eye opener for sure. I think maybe some kids were like, we'll win. We've won the last couple, so it was an eye opener. I don't think we'll take them lightly, and I didn't take them lightly last year for sure. And I don't think we did as a team. But that is out of the equation. If anyone's thinking like, they're in C, they must not be any good. We know that's not true. So and last year proved it.
And it's probably just a natural thing. It's even if you stress it to players over and over again, if they're looking at a 5-game win streak or whatever it is, it's probably natural for that complacency to.
Yeah, I guess so. And Gardner had a long one in the '80s, and he was a part of a couple, 3 or 4 in a row. So when you get to that point, and no one in the high school has either won or lost that game, maybe. That kind of creeps in, like, well, we haven't beaten Gardner. We hadn't beaten them until my senior year. We did beat them, ended like a 4 or 5 game losing streak. So it's certainly in your head, like, we haven't beaten them in a while. We'd like to be the one to end that streak.
Coach, have you heard any chatter from your players about, hey, remember how much fun that was last week? Let's go out and get this again for the guys who are back in the Cam Mishus and Nate Malinowski's and everything. I got to think that there's some talk about that going back and forth.
There is, and one thing I like about our guys is really the only reflection comes from me. I try not to dwell on it because it's a totally different year, and I'm glad that they had the experience to win a game like that. But it's a different set of conditions now. Both teams really playing pretty well in their conferences respectively are going to get a shot at playoffs. And so we've had some ups and downs, but I think in games that I've played personally and games that I've coached where we've beaten Coney, it's been a big confidence boost, and so I think they like to ride those waves if possible, and it's good if you get one going into playoffs like that against a good team. So
Yeah, it certainly worked for you last season.
It did. We rode that one for a while, and it was nice to see. They gained a lot of confidence from it, so that's important.
Yeah, are you both trying to take lessons from last year in terms of like maybe if you're telling a team, hey, this is the time of year last year where we really kicked into another gear and we were playing at a high level, and on the other hand, can you say to your team, hey, we had a pretty good start last year too, and we didn't finish it off the way we like, so let's take that in stride and try to make this a better finish to the season.
I think in most years maybe I'd have to do that, but with our senior group of 18 or 19, and by the way, our senior night might take an hour, so be prepared for that Friday. I don't really think I have to say any of that. They experienced, then we had a lot of juniors playing last year, and now they're seniors, so I don't really have to say much about it. I've heard a little bit of conversation about it, but they seem pretty focused, and they know what happened, and I don't need to dwell on it necessarily. And it's a new year, entirely new year, with a lot of differences between the two teams, but it's still the black and orange and the red and white, and we'll kick it off on Friday night.
Okay, it's certainly one of the best rivalries in the state of Maine. If you get a chance to go out and see it, take that opportunity. And let's move on now to an issue that's been in the eye of the state football community this week is 8-man football has come up again with the Maine Principals Association football committee talking about it this week. No decisions have been made one way or the other. They're just kind of looking for opinions from schools around the state. So I'll just throw it out to you guys. Is the time right for 8-man football to come to Maine high school football?
It may well be. If you look at the conditions all over the state, you've got some programs that are in pretty dire need of maybe reducing the numbers that they put out on the field just so that kids can participate in the game. I think it's going to require a serious conversation. What teams would apply or be approved to do it. But I think football, the numbers game is hurting a lot of communities, and it would be interesting to see how that comes to fruition. But it's got to be looming in the back of some people's minds if they've got 13, 14 kids on a team that historically did compete in classes B and C, and now are barely holding on to a program. So it would be interesting to see how that.
Yeah, and it affects more classes than just maybe Class D or C. We've had a handful of JV and freshman games canceled because teams just don't have enough players to play a JV game. Or it used to be when we played, though, every school had a freshman, JV, and varsity team. Now it's much more common. You either have a freshman or a JV, and if you're really lucky, you get to have both. So. And I know Thornton Academy's had trouble fielding like JV opponents because they're like, hey, we have 14 guys, you have 70 on your JV team, like we're going to get trounced, so we'll play someone else. So it's affecting more than just those small schools. There's a lot of cancellations that are going on, and in our program, you got a bunch of sophomores that don't get a game this week. So like, that was a fun week of practice. I don't even step on the field, and so it's it affects a lot of people, and so the numbers are dropping. And I think it's good to be somewhat proactive and trying to figure out some solutions. You could make the case that it's already a problem, and they should have done it earlier, but. It's better than no football, right? If there's no football at a school, that's like the end of your program. That's a sad day. So whether it's 8 or 6 or 3-on-3 or flag, I want to see some football being played.
7-on-7 spring league,
like
in
I guess,
Texas, right?
Whatever it is, just keep football alive. So it's an unfortunate reality, but again, the alternative is to not have football, and that seems almost unthinkable.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of anything that has more kids playing football and more programs alive. I'm just wondering, is this a step too far right now in that we just started the developmental league, Class E, 2 years ago? This is its second season. Are we not giving that a big enough chance to take hold and see if it's working before we scrap it for a different league entirely?
Yeah, without any stats on hand, you have to go kind of by, kind of a gut reaction, what we've been able to see from Class C so far. But I think we are seeing instances of it working. The local example for us is Miranda Cook, and it does seem like that team has been the numbers have not taken off, but gotten a little better. They've been able to improve their play against teams that are more in their I don't want to say skill level, but depth level.
Yeah.
And so it does feel like if you were to just nix Class E, that you're kind of ending the experiment before we start to see what the results are. It's for something that would ultimately accomplish the same thing, a way for kids at schools that have trouble fielding teams to still play football. But it does put an early end to an experiment that just at a glance I think seems to be working.
Yeah.
Also, when you said when he said Thornton was having trouble fielding JV opponents, I thought you were going to say having trouble fielding JV teams, and I was thinking, oh my God, that's
No. No, they got about 100 kids.
Thornton could probably have 3 or 4 teams if they wanted to.
I'm sure
But,
they can.
all right, let's look at some of the games this week. And we'll start with one that's kind of got implications for you guys down the line. Skowhegan is going to Lawrence. Skowhegan 4-2 in your league, Coach, but undefeated in the conference with a win over you and Brunswick. So it seems like if they win out at Lawrence and then at home against Mount Blue in the final week, they'll be the number 1 seed, and the final game for the season between you and Brunswick will be for number 2 in that second bye.
Yeah, it seems that way. And Skowhegan's had a couple narrow victories, down 20-0 against Brunswick to come back and win that. Down 13-0 to us in week 3, come back and win that. So it shows their resiliency. It's not a surprise when you have a senior quarterback. He's not going to really buckle under pressure. He's been in a lot of big spots. So they've had a good season yet again. And I think our league's pretty open. I think the winner of Hamden Brewer gets the last spot, if I've kind of followed that correctly.
Looks like that.
Then the playoffs, like you said, the winner of ours is us and Brunswick, probably 2-3. And we've seen in the same with yours, I guess last year, upsets happen. So you just got to get in and give yourself a chance. And it'd be nice to be 1 or 2 and have a bye. But if Skowhegan wins out, they're going to be the 1 seed, and they should be, right? They beat us in Brunswick, and I know our fans will say, "Well, we're 5-1, they're 4-2," and I'm like, "Well, we didn't play Kennebunk, we didn't play Kennebunk or Marshwood, so it's a little unfair to them to have to play those 2 and compare them to our crossovers and Gardner and Biddeford, 2 tough opponents, but Kennebunk and they're on another level. So they should be the 1 seed if they went out, and our record may be better than theirs, but it might not be. But if it is, it doesn't necessarily mean that that we should be ahead of them.
Yeah, and Lawrence needs a win. They're probably going to be in that 4-5 game with Mount Blue. It's just a question, is that game going to be back in Farmington at Mount Blue, or is it going to be in Fairfield at Lawrence?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Game, go ahead.
I was going to say, with that Skowhegan team, do you guys scoreboard watch and do you feel like it's a race, or do you look at it more like, hey, if we take care of business and we win these last 2 games, we like where we're sitting regardless of how Skowhegan does?
Yeah, we like where we're sitting right now regardless. If we stay healthy, we feel pretty good about our team. I don't think there's a favorite in our league by any stretch. I mean, Skowhegan's the 1 seed. I don't think they're unbeatable. As I just said, they were down 3 scores to Brunswick, and that was the week after Brunswick lost a bunch of their key starters. So Brunswick's really good. They always are. Coach Cooper does a great job down there, and their line coach, so they're big and physical again. So I feel pretty good where we are. I'm not sure it matters 1, 2, 3 for wherever. Once you get to the playoffs, you got to play better than we did last year, and that's our ultimate goal.
Big game in Class D South. Drew, Madison playing Winthrop and Monmouth Halldale, both 3-3.
Yeah, and we were talking last week or the week before about how the Ramblers should have gotten some confidence boost by playing Wells so competitively. They're one of the most competitive teams against Wells this season, and you kind of get that sense again. They lost to Lisbon by 2 points. This is starting to look like a Winthrop Monmouth Halldale team that can be that sort of team nobody wants to play.
Right.
We always talk about that there's the favorite, and then there's that team that kind of hangs around that dark horse or whatever. They have talent in some key spots. So, and Madison's coming off a loss last week
At Mountain Valley, a game in which they lost by a touchdown and gave up 2 touchdowns on kick returns in the second half. So there's your game, a little special teams tightening, and they win that game.
It feeds into what we were talking about with D South last week, where it's you take away Lisbon and Wells, and it's just a whole bunch of teams in that mix there, and it just feels like every week these teams are playing a game where we're saying the same thing, like standing position at stake here. A lot on the line.
Oh, yeah, this one feels like the winners got a better chance of getting a home game in the first round. Losers, everyone makes playoffs in D South, so they're just resigned to going on the road someplace if they lose this game.
And all D South teams make the playoffs, so when those teams get to the postseason, they're going to be tested. Because again, it's just been 1 week after another of just going up against that grind. Yeah,
and another game in that league should be a big test for a Central Maine team. Oak Hill's playing Spruce Mountain.
Yeah, the thing I'm most interested in seeing that besides just the result of the game is how Gavin Rostrom, the quarterback there, does against a good Spruce team, because he went off last week in a big win for that team, and he's really started to emerge as both a throwing threat, which we knew he'd be at the start of the year, but also a running threat. He makes plays with his legs. Yeah. Ran for over, I think he passed for over 200 yards, ran for over 100 yards last week, and it may have been the second week in a row that he did that.
Yeah, he did that at Madison in the loss, yeah.
So that's if he's starting to really take off, and Stacey Doucette was saying, he said the same quote at the start of the year as in the middle of the year, which is he has the keys to the car now. Like we're not kind of managing him, or he's not a game manager. He is being counted on to go out and
They took the governor off the engine.
Yeah, exactly.
To use another hacky car cliche.
to be a key player for this team, and it's starting to look like he's in his sophomore year that he's starting to emerge as that player. So again, it's Oak Hill as a dangerous team if he's able to be on this kind of a roll going into the playoffs.
Yeah. Coach, I know you're getting ready for Coney, but is there any game in your league that you're kind of scoreboard watching this weekend?
Well, I believe Freiburg's playing Cape.
Yeah.
And Freiburg is always, they've always done well as far as I've seen. Dave Turner is a real good coach out there. He was coach of the year in the Campbell Conference last year, and they played us pretty tough. We don't travel well for sure, but we were down 16-6 at halftime down there a couple weeks ago, and they came out and just blistered us. And final was 36-6. We never saw the end zone again, and they turned it on last week against Levitt. Freiburg did, and I guess many would consider that an upset because Levitt was really dancing over people. But Freiburg's a good football team, and Cape's coming up too. Last week was a little back and forth. I thought we played them pretty well, considering our circumstances. And we had a big play given up to them at the end of the game where they took a screen pass on 50 yards for a touchdown. And if you erase that one, you got a ball game.
Sure.
They're up by a field goal. And but they're both teams are fighting, and that would be an interesting one to watch, Freiburg Cape, because Cape's usually got their number. So it'd be interesting to see if Filio can get them over 500 and moving in the right direction going into playoffs.
Having just seen those two teams, Freiburg put some points on the board against the guys in Cape won a more defensive battle. Do you see that being a more defensive, a lower scoring game, or do you see that being a game where Cape might have to, to score with Freiburg in order to pull up that win?
Yeah, Cape will have to buckle down a little bit. One of the things I've seen with Cape is they can go spread. They can go from wing T to spread in a matter of plays. And if they get big plays and put it out of reach, it's tough to come back from that because they do have a pretty tenacious defense. They had a couple kids Cape did last week that were injured. Dacus kid was out. He's an outstanding linebacker. But I think it's Bussell, the Freiburg's linebacker. That's not.
Yeah, number 50. Boy,
50.
He comes, jumps off the screen.
I want to say Bussell, but boy, that kid too. So you've got both teams can play hard-nosed football, and then they can go up top and burn you pretty good too if they start to get big plays rolling.
Sure. Okay. Game worth mentioning in Class A this week is Portland versus Oxford Hills for first place in the North. Either of you guys know anything about them?
I just know the Oxford Hills quarterback's going to Maine on a baseball
Sure.
scholarship, and he looks like a pretty good quarterback. He's about 6'5", and he beat us in basketball here. And that's his third sport. He had like 26 and 14 and like a ho-hum evening. So Colton Carson's the real deal.
And Oxford Hills coming off a big win over Bonnie Eagle.
Yeah, absolutely. That was
It's
kind of a
nice
shocker.
to see the Oxford Hills program doing well because that's an old school, hard nosed, tough team, and the kids out there are tough. But so are the kids from Bar Mills and Buxton, and so I imagine that was probably a pretty good game. Can't count any of those guys out because they're tough.
Oxford Hills, an old rival from both of your schools in the
Sure.
old PTCA back in the day.
Yeah.
Yes.
That must have been a big win for the respect and just the image of A North. I bet
Sure.
a lot of people thought that they were just kind of okay, who's going to win A North and just get crushed by the A South team. And that might still be the case because Thornton is looking like the
They handled
85
Scarborough
Bears,
pretty easily here.
The 85 Bears and the 98 Vikings there in A South, but for Oxford Hills to get that win over Bonnie Eagle people were thinking that Bonnie Eagle was part of that big three in A South with Scarborough and Thornton. Just goes to show that maybe A North, if you take Thornton out of the equation, matches up better to A South than maybe we thought at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, certainly would like to see that to get more competitive state games than we had last season. So, all right, that's going to do it for this week on Gridiron Gurus. Come back next week when we have the last week of the regular season, Week 8. For Drew, for Coach White, for Coach Lippert, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.